Good morning.
Come on. Morning.
Hello, ladies and ladies. All you other people, we just don't care about you.
That's Reed, the ladies' man.
Welcome to K7554.32.
I know. Your only choice when you don't have a choice.
Welcome to the morning show, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday, October 29th. We are perfectly starting on time, as we usually do. I am Reed Garcia.
This is Ryder Richards.
And that's about it. So, Ryder, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm a bit zonked, man. I just made an entire pot of coffee without putting the grounds in. So I made lukewarm water into hot water.
Was it filtered through the filter?
Yeah, it was filled. The whole thing went through. It did the whole process.
So now you have
There's just no
filtered hot
coffee in
water.
it.
Do
Yeah,
you need to go step away to finish your coffee?
I actually just did. That's
Okay.
one of the reasons we're starting late. I apologize to everyone. I had kind of a long yesterday. I don't know if you've ever done sheetrock up above your head, but lifting pieces of sheetrock up over your head and then somehow still being able to screw them in to the studs in the right place. Like, you can see the difficulty there. Like,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
4x8 sheet. It's not a small
So
thing.
one of the things we're going to talk about today is knowing when to ask for help.
What? Oh. But that I don't know if I can. I just like, part of it is the entire challenge of figuring it out on my own. Like, at some point my wife came home and was like, "Do you want help?" And I was like, "I'm so close to done. I'm just going to like go ahead and own this one and like
Yeah.
take it all on my own." Yeah, so yeah, we probably should
Also
have this
today,
conversation.
dogged stubbornness.
Yes, rough. Yes,
And the
indeed.
third topic for today, sunk costs.
I know. Yeah, I try to enact as many fallacies as possible on any given day. Usually Thursdays. Thursdays are a good day for it.
Well, I also was going to point out that maybe I would be pleasantly surprised, but the pool of people who have done sheetrock over their head at all, I'm gonna hope is not that large, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Anyway, we can get into all that later, I suppose. It's just one of those daunting chores I put on myself. And anytime you work over your head, and this is something maybe you're more familiar with, is like even just reaching up into tall cabinets and stuff. After you've done these motions where your arms are up and you're on your tiptoes, I don't know, just do it for 30 minutes. And like the next day, your entire back is sore. And you're just like, but I wasn't even using my back. So,
Just walking around like.
yeah, it's practice for when you get older. That's you just get to make those sounds.
Well, for those of you, well, for all of you, because we weren't live yet, but we were about to click live, and I was like, Ryder, can you look less dead?
Yeah, and I was just like,
He was just sitting there, and I was like, oh, maybe one of those tweaked muscles is like pressing against your spinal cord. And
yeah, I know. Yeah, I actually do have a weird thing going on in my neck today, so it's like, but I think 90% of that's just from having my head craned back for 6 hours straight or something. Oh
Well,
well, whatever.
one good thing about Thursdays is they're right before Fridays, and you know what happens with Fridays? The weekends, which are times where you get to sit down and relax, right, Ryder?
No.
Oh.
Weekends are when you catch up on all the other projects that your day job has blocked you from getting done.
Oh, man, fun how that works out sometimes, huh?
Oh, yeah, it seems to be all the time for me. I tend to do this. My wife calls it burning the candle at both ends. So,
As long
yeah.
as the other end isn't a little gaseous, it could lead to explosions.
I know, yes. Yeah, speaking of, I just started going through my fart art podcast
Podcast.
yesterday. Podcast. Fart art part. I did a podcast a while back on Let Us Think About It that's called Fart Art. and it's based on some artwork that I made, which was, of course, all about people farting, wearing business suits, and the idea of like lifting yourself up while you're asleep at work, based off of this. There was some actual ideas in it, but mostly it was just kind of funny. So when you do a podcast, then you want to publish it on social media, you have to break it up into these little chunks. And I call them snippets. A lot of people do. And so I had to rewatch that one, and I was just like, oh man, what a crazy episode. I can't believe that I just spent 45 minutes talking about farts. So,
Well,
yeah,
you
if
know,
anyone is interested in burning the candle at that end, then please hop over to letusthinkaboutit.com.
yes, well, I will, I'll help reel that in a little bit because you can be very playful sometimes. It is serious art, and it does have some fun things to it. And I think that's one of the interesting things. Kind of like what we like to talk about on this show is, don't take yourself too seriously, and things like farts and other taboo topics. Not that farts are that taboo, but especially when compared to business people farting during their meetings or while they're falling asleep at work or things like that. I don't know. It's just it's fun, and it is also you have some really cool metaphors and things like that kind of play into it as well. So. If they want to hear the podcast, they'll go to letusthinkaboutit.com and look for the episode called Fart Art. If they want to see a couple
Yeah.
things of your fart art, where's the best place for them to see that?
I have writerrichards.com, writerrichards.us. The .us is mostly my art site, and yet if you do go to the podcast website, I actually have posted some of the pictures of the fart art on there. I think it's step 44 is the fart art podcast. But yeah, there really is something quite interesting about business wear in general when you start getting into why people wear business garments. I think, it's basically because you're trying to fit into a certain tribe, I would think, because everyone ends up looking mostly the same. And then you get really excited when somebody has like a slightly different pattern on their suit or something. You're like, oh, how rebellious. It's
Ooh,
not
check
just
out those
normal blue.
socks.
Yeah, I know. Ooh, pink tie. Wow, bold choice, especially in this office. It's just that kind of stuff. And so I think there's something funny about the idea of these perfect outfits and then showing up for all your friends and trying to be so perfect. And then, actually your bodily functions creep out when you're least expecting it. So, yeah, I kind of like how it undercuts ideology. You can have all these frameworks you think you're existing in, but they're all artificial anyway. And one of the ultimate grounding devices for that is sort of something like the human body. It's kind of concerns and flatulence and everything else. It's like no matter how beautiful you are, you still poop and it's gross.
Yes,
Hey,
yes,
there we
that's
go.
that's pretty good. So I put it up on the screen, and back to live mode. WriterRichards.com, and I spelled it out just in case. And for those who are audio only, RYDER RICHARDS.com. And you should go there to check out his fart art and letusthinkaboutit.com. If it's not linked on WriterRichards.com, Writer, hopefully you will do that at some point. Um,
Oh, they're all interlinked and
oh,
woven
good. Look at
together. And
you.
so
Look at
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Man,
it's
you know
almost
a
like I
thing or
build
two.
websites for a living. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. Well, thank you for bringing your farts back up. That's always a pleasure. Um, yes. So what?
Yeah, when we're doing this remote interview, it's just fine.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I appreciate it. And for those who can't see the video, I am actually out of doors again. I'm still on a trip right now, and so I'm actually on a boat. And yes, and so it's kind of nice. I'm out here on a lake and watching kind of the sun. It's cool because the lake's a little bit in like a depression. I mean, it had kind of a bad couple years and it just doesn't really know how to pull itself out of it. But no, what I actually meant was it's
That
actually in
lake
a.
needs some therapy.
Yes, it does. It's the lower point, and it's kind of in a little bit of a bowl, and there's trees that kind of go all around the lake, and as the sun is rising, you can kind of see the bands of color coming around.
Uh,
So it's actually very pleasant. Now it's getting a little brighter now, but it was very nice, especially as it transitioned from dark to light. You ever watch any sunrises?
Oh, not as often as I want to, but yeah, I actually do. I enjoy the sunrise. Also, I've started trying to get into the habit of taking a few minutes off during sunset. There's this kind of, where I live anyway, there's this kind of peak moment when the sky, the coloration just goes crazy. Just for a brief minute, like everything turns like pink and orange, and it lasts maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and then it starts fading again, and so I kind of love trying to time that out and hit that moment.
Oh yeah, sunsets are something I've come to appreciate a lot more, and especially my apartment that we live in now. It's got these big sliding glass doors that face west, and again, it actually looks out where the land drops down, and so I can see more of the land and see over the trees, over the houses, and things like that. And yeah, we're kind of spoiled with
So,
sunsets where we're
yeah,
at.
lording it on high from all those people, you
Yes, looking
know?
down on the peasants and say, "Ha
Yeah,
ha."
you poor plebes.
But yeah, the sunsets are I think they're a really great way to help also like ground you and like reset you. It's like, hey, it doesn't matter how the day's going, like you go look at observe something that's pretty. Um, and Also the cool thing about the sun and the moon is you can see them wherever you are. Obviously, cloud coverage can make it harder in certain places, right? But I mean, that's one of the cool things. It's a good reminder of one, you can see the sun and the moon anywhere you are on the Earth, or even out of Earth, as long as you're not blocked by another planet, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
and it's also a good reminder of, hey, we're just tiny little ants on this tiny little planet compared to this giant, massive sun, which is really, really far away from us. And at the end of the day, we're small in the grand scheme of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, we surround ourselves with objects that are built for our scale and size, right? Cars and houses and things like that. And then all of a sudden, you have to watch a sunset and you just go, whoa. Like, I mean, there's something really, like you talked about being grounded, there's a perspectival shift. But what's also, I listened to Dr. Andrew Huberman the other day talking about how our circadian rhythms, are set through sort of like mitochondria in
And
our
real
DNA,
quick,
in our cells.
the
Yeah.
sorry, the circadian rhythm is like the way your body naturally uses light to help you. Oh, it's getting dark. I need to fall asleep and wind down. It's
Yeah.
getting light. I need to kind of start waking up. So you're saying about mitochondria. Say that.
Oh, yeah, he was talking about the biology of it, and he was going through several things, but what's kind of fascinating about it is that you have a dopamine response, which is a motivation chemical in your body. People tend to think of it as a happiness chemical, but he's trying to dispel that belief and say it's more about motivation. But you actually get more dopamine whenever you're watching early morning and late night, the sunrise, sunset. But whenever the sun gets from basically 2 to 4, whenever it gets high, the sun gets higher in the sky, we actually decrease dopamine levels by being outdoors or looking in nature. So there's this
Hmm.
fascinating aspect to watching a sunset. The only reason I bring any of that up is we're talking about sunsets, and I just think there's a weird aspect to our human nature wanting to watch the sunset, wanting to watch this, and it sort of grounds our circadian rhythms. And he says if you get 10 to 15 minutes of low level light, so sunset, sunrise, that kind of thing, then it can really help your circadian rhythms, and it actually sort of resets the cells in you to do certain things at certain times. So, for instance, like protein synthesis happens best in the morning, which was a new fact for me. And then that's all based off of circadian rhythms.
Interesting. Uh, that's always cool to hear all of the random things that people are figuring out and thinking about that you have absolutely no idea about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't even really know what to do with this information, but yes, I will watch the sunset a little more often if that's what it takes. Any excuse, right? Now I can
Yeah.
claim that I'm, somehow being more efficient or better to my body by spending 5 minutes actually engaging in nature. When I think we all know we would all be better off engaging with nature a little bit more.
Yeah, well, you know what? If you're someone who does not engage with nature, I think this is a really good challenge for us to have today. Of course, I reserve the right to add on additional challenges because that's just the kind of guy I am. But go look at a sunrise or a sunset. And keep in mind that next Sunday, so Today is October 29th, so not in 2 days, but in 9 days, roughly, if I'm doing my math right. Daylight savings time is going to hit, and since we're in the fall, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryder, but I believe that means the time will fall back. So when the clock hits 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, so which is kind of like Saturday night, depending on how late you stay up, the clock will go back to 1. So you effectively, that means that your sunrises and your sunsets are going to happen 1 hour earlier. Did I mess any of that up, Ryder?
No, no, that sounds great to me. I don't know. I actually don't like this daylight savings time thing. I think it's bizarre and anachronistic in this current time period, but it's also probably because I live in Texas and maybe it's not such a big thing here. Maybe if I lived in a different latitude, then it would change the way I viewed it, but I don't really find it to be helpful. I find it to just sort of be confusing, and it's a little bit of pain I have to suffer twice a year because someone made up some strange rule that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good uplifting comment
Yeah.
from Ryder there.
It's a super
Yeah.
cynic over here.
No, no. I actually, maybe next week. I think we should talk about the time change. I think that would be fun to look into a little bit of the history and also
Yeah, yeah.
see if there's any redeeming qualities that we might not be aware of.
Oh, there probably are. I'm sure there's 100 of them, but, yeah, I do find it strange to sort of, I don't know, uh, change up the entire world's way of dealing with something that is already an artificial construct, but you know what I mean? It's just kinda like we kinda keep playing with things to tweak them, and I could understand there were probably benefits before we had so much electricity and before everyone had air conditioning and things like that. I could really see some benefits to it, but I'm just not sure anymore. So yeah, let's do some research on it. Hop into that topic for maybe next week.
Cool. Uh, there's some ducks over here. So in case those happen to come across, let's see.
That duck has a lot to say.
He really does. He realized he was. I was like, they're gonna stop talking, and I was like, no, he's just gonna go on for 30
No.
minutes.
It'd be funny if it was like the same word over and over again. Just like, hey, 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 hey.
uh, uh, I feel like there's some silly internet video that's like, Steve, there's like a groundhog or
Yeah.
something like that. Does
Yeah,
that
I
ring any
know there was a
bells for you?
SpongeBob episode where he kept going off on Kevin. "Hey, Kevin, Kevin, Kevin."
Yes, nice.
No. Yeah, so
uh,
let's see. I was thinking since you're traveling today and you just, like, went through this, disc golf thing yesterday, I wanna get the update on that. How did that play out?
Yeah, it actually was a ton of fun, and it played out pretty well. My friend, so I think I mentioned yesterday that he's an amateur, and actually this tournament is kind of like the championship for the year. And he came in saying that he's like basically every player has a rating based on how well they do, and just want to acknowledge the lovely duck emoji we got here
Oh,
from Kenny
nice.
making that appearance in the chat.
Quack, quack.
And whoever wins this tournament actually can win a decent amount of money, and then once you accept money, you become a pro. And so it's kind of like, hey, come to this tournament and win, and then you can turn pro. Um, but there's also an interesting thing where you can refuse the money and then stay as an amateur. And so that's one of the things is because once you become a pro, you can no longer play in amateur tournaments at least until you like go dormant for 5 years or something like that. And so it's an interesting thing because it's like, all right, disc golf as of right now is not like football or basketball or something like that where there's a decent amount of money to be made. It's still a pretty young sport, but this past couple years has grown a lot in that regard and has been setting records basically with every new tournament that's coming up. And actually, this year there was one player who's kind of considered one of the greatest of all time, or the GOAT, as some people like to say. His name's Paul Macbeth, and he He is he got a $10 million contract this year. So that
Whoa.
it was a 10 years at 1 million apiece, and that's from his sponsor. And so that was definitely record setting and very newsworthy, and he promptly went and got a Lamborghini or Bugatti or something like that, which I don't
Yeah.
blame him because to give perspective, like the basically most of these guys are living out of their vans or cars and kind of traveling around, and if they happen to win, maybe they get a couple grand. If they're lucky, and if they don't win, they end up with scraps, if anything. So it,
Yeah.
it makes it kind of hard to make a living right doing that. And so it's cool to see the sport grow. And one of the really interesting things about watching the sport grow is it's growing in 2021. And, that is amazing because of the power of the internet and YouTube and this kind of mix of you get to see the players as they're developing and things like that. And they have a lot of times they do their own stuff on their own social media, and they have their own content that they make. So you feel like you really get to know these people. And also it's small enough to where like if you go to a pro event or something like that, like you could maybe go talk to them and maybe get something signed. Or they also host clinics. So like one of tomorrow night, one of the famous pros is actually doing a putting clinic, helping people how to putt. Um, and so it's kind of cool because it's still at that scale where that's very accessible. And also, if you're good enough, right, and that's what some of these amateurs do. Like you just practice and you play and you learn, and eventually you could actually play with these guys, or at the very least in the same tournament. Maybe you'd be in the same tournament, but they'd be way better than you. But I think that's kind of a cool aspect, which makes the sport a little more interesting to me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, the entry threshold is low, and it's also seems like it took off as well during the pandemic because it's kind of a you could be quasi socially isolated. The same way with golf. I know that like golf courses were completely packed during the pandemic. People couldn't go to work, so they would just go outside and be in nature, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it was really good timing because the sport was kind of already starting to grow. There's a YouTube channel called Jomez Pro, Jomez Pro, um, and they're essentially kind of like the ESPN of disc golf. And it just started out with a couple of guys like, oh man, it's maybe like 10 years ago. It's like it's been a while, but not that long. And it started out with probably two guys and a camera. Um, and then now it's really very professional, and they've actually been on TV now, on CBS I think last year, and also ESPN. They've been the ones to do the actual coverage. And the other cool thing about the way it's come up is if you go watch some coverage on Jomez, you can watch the tournament, and like it's the players doing the analysis and stuff like that, and they're actually in the tournament. So sometimes they actually are commentating on themselves, and the guys are all it's a close knit group. It's not a like football. Each team's got what 80 players or something on the roster
Oh,
times however
yeah,
many
it's
teams.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas this is like the entire pro scene is, and I'm gonna mess up the numbers, but on the order of, uh, a couple hundred, right? And then there's of course like the top 50, right? Where it's like they all know each other and they play all the time and all that kind of stuff. So it's cool, and you can tell a lot of them are friends, and they. It's not like And to be fair, I've not watched a ton of golf coverage, but if you watch golf coverage, it's like, oh yes, and here he is, he's stepping up, and ooh, he swings it, and oh yes, and it's like very
It is, it's perfect, soundtrack to go to sleep on a Sunday too.
yes, which many people do. So the disc golf coverage is cool because it's some guys a little younger, and they're not afraid to make jokes and like poke fun and like do this. It's like whenever they went on actual TV like CBS, ESPN, they dialed it down a little bit. They went a little more professional, and I'm sure some of that was at the guidance of those networks, right? But it's cool to see that kind of coverage, and it makes it again a little more fun and entertaining to watch, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. You're also in Austin or the Austin area anyway. I'm assuming now you're you're in a lake near Austin.
Yeah.
But yeah, I yesterday I was kind of thinking about Austin, and it's kind of got a reputation that has been built, and it's a little bit different than, say, the rest of Texas. And there's something kind of interesting to me about that, like how this city has developed into something that's completely, I don't know, it seems like the blue dot in the middle of a Red Sea. And that's not necessarily true in Texas, but it definitely feels that way. And then there's also something about it, they used to have the keep Austin weird kind of stuff. I don't know if Austin can be weird anymore. Like, it seems like it might have just gotten too big for that. Have you got to spend any time in the city?
So on this trip, not so much yet. But I have been here a couple times before, especially, and I have friends who live here and things like that. But yeah, Austin has had this, to clarify, the liberal, from the political spectrum, right? They've been very liberal, which in general, the bigger cities, right, kind of tend to be a little more liberal than conservative. But also within Texas, right, which is a very conservative state overall, um, it's also a capital city, which is kind of like a one-two punch. By having a capital city, which is where the state government is, then that's going to bring a lot of people who are coming to try and make changes and protesting and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Austin's kind of always had this vibe where it's a little bit weird, a little bit hippie, a little bit fun, but it's also, yeah, as you're mentioning, it's changing a lot. Austin has a lot of gentrification, which is where they take the kind of more run down areas of towns, or maybe not even run down, but just lower income, and then they basically put a bunch of money into it and they develop it, and then it's like, okay, well, this kind of place where you used to be able to get rent for 800, now it's 2,000 or 2,500, and
Yeah, right.
it's a very
Which
controversial type of thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and it is sort of, we're talking about it being a capital, and we're talking about these increases on rent, and that also plays into the part that UT is downtown. So you have this huge state school that's downtown, a very well ranked, well placed state school, and so you have students coming in every year, which means there are landlords who are going to take advantage of that, because a lot of these students are going to live, four people in a house or whatever else and split rent. And they want to be as close as possible, because parking on campus, especially because I think the UT campus is landlocked, then they can't expand further outwards. So parking on campus is a nightmare. So you end up starting to get people who want to spend a ton of money to live close to campus so they can sort of walk and participate in campus life without the car thing. Yeah, so this is not only a problem though for UT, the university itself, but it's also a problem for businesses that are downtown. They'll do things like have to buy an entire building just to use the parking.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting thing about cities, which um, is honestly one of the main reasons I'm excited for autonomous vehicles, because I think that
Mm,
is going to completely change the landscape of where we live, where we work, what all of that looks like. Because when you are no longer the one who has to be sitting there actively paying attention as you're driving, one, you're going to be willing to go a little further, and it's not going to be as much of a grind. And also, if you go far enough in the future in autonomous vehicles and they start to get networked and things like that, things will get more efficient and they'll go faster. And oh, by the way, like, especially if you see some of these concept cars from the future, they're trying to essentially make a living room with wheels. So you can just be
yeah.
chilling and working or doing literally whatever you want. If you need to be doing your makeup, or if you need to be like discussing how daylight savings time is a hoax and it makes my life miserable, you can do whatever you want. So I'm really curious
Uh,
to see how that redistributes things, because that's the problem with cities, and it's interesting to see how different the cities and the surrounding areas can look as you go from the east side of the U.S. to the west, because the east,
mm,
it started a very long time ago, 1600s, and it kind of gradually grew out towards the west. And so the way that roads are laid out, and the way that the developments are laid out, it changed a lot, and a lot of that was centered around the automobile as well.
mhm.
And so now there's all these types of things where you have all these roads and you can't do expansion because there's now buildings on both sides of those roads and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
there's a lot about the city that changes and shifts and morphs. And then one big thing with Texas, Texas doesn't have a state income tax. It's one of, I believe, four states that don't have it. Off the top of my head, I think Oregon, or not Oregon, Washington, and then maybe Florida, and I think two others that I don't know off the top of my head. But that means that, in a lot of states, for example, California, it was much as like 9% or something like that. And so
Mhm.
when you move to a state that doesn't have that income tax, that's just a nice little bonus. And then of course Texas has lots and lots of space and land, and it has a government that wants more and more companies to come in. And so there's a lot of companies that will move to Texas, and that's a big thing too. Which, talking about shifting politics or the feel of the city, it's a very big sentiment in Texas where a lot of people are coming from California. And of course, there's some people
Yeah.
who are like, yes, thank you, bring on some more of that. And then there's some people like, get off my land, boy, go back to your
Yeah.
Indians.
Well, we live just far enough out that there's quite a few trucks that are out, have stickers on them. And you can just see the normal ones that are a little less confrontational. That a little bumper sticker will say something like "Texas born, Texas raised," "Texas native," all these kind of things. It's like people start really like owning this as a hallmark of pride, which I think is always kind of funny and interesting, right? Because you were geographically born somewhere and then you decide to claim this as your source of all power, or authority within space. It's like, eh, that's
Wait, the thing
probably
you
not a
had,
good metric to use, buddy.
literally the time where you had the least control
Yes,
in your life,
exactly.
it's like you just
I
popped
know.
out, dude.
I know. I'm gonna take so much pride in this. I'm gonna get it tattooed on my chest. It's one of those kind of things that they so much pride about it. But Texas is fairly unique, and there is a sort of mystique about it. And people that are from Texas they just take a ton of pride in it. I, of course, grew up in New Mexico and moved to Texas during high school. So when I first came over, I just found it bizarre. I was like, how could you care so much? It's just another place, right? Like, but after a while, you sort of start drinking the Kool-Aid because things do operate differently here. There are different sort of rules. There's just different social norms. There's sort of different conceits about it. That's the other thing is the people in California. A lot of them are attempting to escape something that's happening in California, whether it's taxation or something else. And they're moving over to Texas. So there's been several famous podcasters and bloggers and content producers who have moved from California to Texas. And then they immediately show up and they bring all of their California politics in, which is the thing that is pissing off, I think, a lot of the Texans. It's like, don't California, what is it? Don't Californize my Texas or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not surprised to hear that. But Texas is a cool state, and just to point out, we are not biased at all. Neither of us live here, and I've lived here for a while and enjoy it. We are completely non-biased. But but yeah, it's cool because it's got a nice mix of rural and country and city, and it's in a lot of the places people live in the suburbs, the areas just outside of those major cities, you can kind of get a mix of those things. So my sister just moved back to the Dallas area, and her apartment, she looks out over a field with cows in it. But yet she's 15 minutes from, I don't know, 100 restaurants and countless shopping and all that kind of stuff. So it's like right on that edge of, okay, as things get further developed, you start to see some of these fields be converted into more subdivisions and shopping centers and things like that. I remember there was this one intersection in the city of Allen, and also Fairview as well. 75 is the highway, and Stacy Road, if anyone wants to look at a map and see. And there's four corners of this. And in the northwest corner, a long time ago, they built an outlet mall. And so this was an outlet mall, and there's all this shopping and things like that. And it was like people come down from Oklahoma because it was like the closest like good shopping they could get, and like it was a big destination and stuff like that. Well, then I don't know, somewhere in the, oh, I'm getting old now. It's like, oh, it's just yesterday when they're building these things. I don't know, probably
It
15
was.
years or so. It's probably been
It was
15
like
years or
yesterday
so.
from my time span, I'm so old. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's all relative. But yeah, say 15 years ago they developed the northeast corner or whatever, and then they developed the southeast corner, and they developed three of these corners, and then in the southwest corner there was this one big field that was just a field, and there was this one little kind of shack looking thing on it, and everyone's always wondering like, when are they going to sell? When are they going to cash in? And those people were just the right amount of patient because it was within the last year and a half, maybe 2 years that they sold. And
Mhm.
no lie, they had to have made tens of millions of dollars on that piece of land because it's like you have all of this proof of all of this shopping and all of these restaurants and things could do. And by the way, this could be incorrect, but I believe my mom told me that that area has more restaurants per capita than anywhere in the U.S. So,
Oh,
because it's just all this shopping and restaurants and bars and all this type of stuff right there. And I was like, man, I wish I had been lucky enough to pop out in Texas and my
I
parents had
know.
owned that little piece of
Right on
land.
the corner, right
And then I
there.
could have had me some tens of millions of dollars.
I know, I know. It's so funny how these systems are in place, and then we sort of get to claim ownership, or you can become very wealthy depending on who you're born to and where you're born. Like being born in America, period, is more of a blessing than it is being born in a lot of other places. And so, there's these little things that happen, and then yet it's very easy to sort of frown or condemn other people for different things. I was reading an article yesterday that brought up sort of Trump and his, this kind of idea that he had got $1 million loan from his dad right off the bat, and how his presidency was really had a lot to say about re-entrenching those kind of values of, being born into systems of wealth. And yet, a lot of the people that follow him weren't born into that system, yet they're still praising that system. And so it was kind of a just I'm not going to go too far into it because the article was actually about something else that was just like one little sentence in there. But yeah, I think that when it comes to things like having land or access to land, some people are very smart and they work their butt off to go out and get it and position themselves properly. I think that's harder to do today than it ever has been in the past, just because it seems like a lot of these mechanisms are now open for people to find on the internet and read in books, and so it's a little bit saturated in those fields. But yeah, I kind of still. I mean, I work for a retail company, so it's retail development, it's retail consulting, and whichever corner that is, those corners are very valuable, and they get down to things like where you can put a restaurant based off of whether it's morning traffic or evening traffic that comes by, and that can increase the margins to allow a deal to happen based on which side of the road a business is on. And that's how tight they've gotten on the demographics and then the analytics for some of these businesses. So yeah, I'm kind of always a little bit shocked when I bump into something and they're like, well, no, we need this much egress for this reason so this truck can get in here, and like it's very specific. And whenever we're working with some of the smaller communities, then it's of course they want a Chick-fil-A or something, but Chick-fil-A's only show up when you have a certain kind of franchisee who has done X, Y, and Z, and you have to have a population over, a quarter million, and it's all these numbers that you have to hit before they will open various locations. So the fact that we have so much of it here, just so much consumption in these areas, because that's what it tells me when we have this many restaurants and this much shopping, is when I used to commute and I'd commute, an hour and a half down into Dallas and then an hour and a half back. Then I remember thinking to myself, all along the way, it's nothing but stores. How much stuff is having to be bought just to keep every one of these businesses in business? Like how much consumption has to go on regularly just to keep everyone employed? So those are just the random thoughts I have while driving.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure it's like, it's so dark out here. If it wasn't for this dang daylight savings
I
and all
know.
these people consuming things, I wouldn't have this commute.
I know.
Grumble, grumble,
Oh,
grumble,
oh,
grumble.
speaking of that, you were talking about city developments and roads, yeah, a little bit back, and how the cities, their layouts and developments have changed because of the road design. One of the things that's when I was taking architecture classes back at Texas A&M, then one of the things that was brought up was that um, you don't actually reduce traffic by widening highways because by the time you have widened them, they're already full of traffic again. Because more people think their commute will take less time, so they move further out and just commute further. And so all this widening of roads will never account for all the use of cars. And so a lot of people that do city design and stuff like that actually sort of advocate for the opposite, which is to get rid of highways and force people to actually move in closer to, say, a city center and pay higher rent as a way to sort of mitigate the climate change and the sort of sprawling suburbs and all that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, and that's where I think a big answer is autonomous vehicles, and also, being a little more collectivistic about vehicles and how you get around and transportation, right? But it's funny because yeah, we built all these roads and these highways and these developments, right? Where it's so focused on every home having a car. And I have a friend who lives in Denver, and they're like, look, if I wanted to take the bus, like, I mean, it's a mile from my or 2 miles from my house to the end of, open of the neighborhood, and that's not even there's not even necessarily like a bus stop or anything there. So it's
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
just not even an option. Like he's forced to do something else, right? Even if he wanted to do otherwise. And so yeah, I mean, things like having autonomous vehicles, and also that could turn into autonomous, buses, or there's these concepts of you have your small individualized vehicle that may then go link up with kind of a chain of multiple of those smaller vehicles to essentially be some type of bus where like you come and then you join on like the highway, and then like whenever it's your thing breaks off and it goes. There's a lot of really cool ideas out there. But unfortunately, a lot of those things are going to take a really long time to actually happen, and one of that's just because of stubborn resistance from people who probably a lot of people who are afraid. Honestly, I think is one of the
Well,
biggest
those
things.
people who don't like daylight savings time. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
a
that
lot of
guy,
stubborn resistance.
that guy, exactly. Stubborn resistance. That's the name of your first album, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny because bringing up autonomous vehicles, you can get into why, you know, so many people like the idea of not only having control, but having control in a car is also control over your life in a certain way. It's control over your death as well. At least that's the theory or the illusion that we sort of operate under is that, if I was in this car, I would make this decision at this point in time. And I can't trust an autonomous vehicle to be as good at this as I am. Yet, if of course we were all using autonomous vehicles, then who knows if there would be any collisions at all. So it's kind of a fascinating little thing to get into. Is right now people feel like they're having to compete against autonomous vehicle decision making, um, and sort of like, I don't know, retain some sort of autonomy or freedom on the roads. And I think all that's kind of interesting, but it also goes back to the idea that we grew up as a car culture. Um, you know, Getting in your car and heading out west was kind of this mythos of the American dream and how you came to life, and people would, develop their entire identity based around which kind of car they had and the kind of modifications they made to it and things like that. And so when we talk about giving that up, then that would have to be, I would assume it would tend to be replaced with something else. So maybe we just need a dream to displace that
Yeah,
car notion.
that's a good point. Some other thing like I don't know, jetpacks for everybody. Yeah.
Yes, woo! 'Cause what could
uh,
go wrong with that? Put a bunch of
well, what
guys in Texas jetpacks,
exact Texas jetpacks?
and then they just go up and fight drones by hand.
Yeah. The drone enforcers.
Drone fight jetpack. Yeah, it's a little
Duh.
squad of militia.
That sounds very fun and super safe. But yeah, and another thing to point out is I don't know how it was for you back when you had to Flintstone car it and use your feet to propel yourself forward. But I know for sure when I was growing up, getting the car, or at the very least getting your driver's license, was a huge step because that was a big indication of independence, right? And kind of like you were
Mm.
saying, control. And it was like, all right, now I can go where I want, when I want, and I can go do whatever, right? And so that is another part of the car because that starts out as a very big part of kind of your identity and what you're able to do. Yeah, what out of curiosity, Ryder, what was the first car that either you drove or you owned, or however you want to interpret that?
Yeah, the first car back when I lived in New Mexico was a truck. It had I don't know, it was like a four-cylinder engine in it, but it was a pretty big truck, so it could, it wasn't a great truck, but it was a decent truck, especially as a first one for a kid. The guy that sold it to my dad kept saying it had a Batman package on it. And he couldn't figure out what he was talking about, but it had this roll bar with KC lights, and the KC lights had this little Batman symbol on the center of them. So, yeah, that was the first vehicle I had, and then after that, I upgraded to a Z71 stepside truck, and that was a
Wow,
lot
that
of
sounds
fun.
fancy.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. But in between there, I ended up having an old irrigation truck that I purchased for $250 from my grandpa, and it was this like long bed yellow, like a beige yellow, like khaki, because it just been so wind worn and everything else. But back then,
Some
they actually
people
used to
wear
just
khakis. I drive khakis.
yeah, drive khaki. So boring. Yeah, but it had like a 3 on the tree shift, so your gear shifts were on the I don't know, steering column. And so, yeah, it was kind of fun, but second gear didn't work, so you just rev it up to like, 5,000 RPM and then just drop it straight into third. And
Nice.
it was and of course it didn't have like mufflers on it. It was just a straight pipe, so it was just super loud and just anyway, it was a great truck. I actually ended up bolting like another bench seat into the back, and during lunch, I'd look out the window at school and there'd just be people hanging out in the back of my truck eating lunch. And yeah,
Your
it was
friends or just random people?
just they're friends. It's mostly like guys that I played football with or whatever. We had multiple breaks, but it was kind of a fun thing to have a truck that was so like you just didn't care if anything happened to it. You could keep it running and then you could just drive it wherever you want. And I'd go do construction jobs and just pile up the back of it with a ton of junk. And then instead of taking it to the dump, I would just go out into a field and then just hit the gas and speed up and just start hitting jumps until all the stuff fell out of the back of the truck.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Where was this,
Yeah.
by the way?
Yeah, I can't tell you.
What state was it in?
Oh, that was in Texas. Yeah, when I
Okay,
had that irrigation truck. Yeah.
nice.
Um, but yeah, man, it was pretty good. How about you? What was your first vehicle?
Yeah, so the first
Vehicle.
the first car that I drove was a Toyota Avalon, which is like a
Mm,
sedan, and actually was a pretty cool car. It was, I don't know if it's called midsize or full or whatever, but it's kind of a larger one. So I drove that for a little bit, and then ended up with the Hyundai Elantra, um,
mhm.
which was Hyundai was interesting, and I like or I've observed with Hyundai, Kia, a lot of these budget brand car manufacturers. It's been cool to watch their transition because when we got ours, this was a Hyundai Elantra from 2004. Hyundai had just transitioned, like they kind of went through the way car development works is every, they kind of go off of a tick tock cycle, I think, and so they go or tick 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 tock, and so every year they have some small changes. That's what's called a tick. This is concept of TikTok development. I don't know exactly how you would phrase it, but and then every 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, that's a talk, and that's where you have a more significant change. So when it comes to cars, that's some sort of major body change or something like that. And so Hyundai, they were kind of going through this talk, and they had done it, I guess, sometime in the early 2000s, and they went from being just god awful, really ugly. You could tell this is a cheap car kind of look. Um,
Yeah.
to this is kind of a little bit better, but still kind of ugly, and still you can tell this is a cheap car. And then somewhere in the late 2000s, maybe early 2010s ish, we that now is I got a 2011 Hyundai Sonata, and if you look at that, it is very much that was kind of the body style where you couldn't tell if it's a Honda or a Toyota or a Hyundai. They look all very similar, and then even since then they've refined even further to where you see one now, and I think they even have commercials about it, right? It's like, oh, that's a Kia or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
they look
Right.
really, really nice. And so now the budget cars, a lot more people are willing to buy because they frankly they look a lot nicer and they don't look that much different from the Toyota or the Lexus or what have you. Um, So yeah, that was my progression of cars. All sedans, no trucks in my family. My hands are too soft to be doing any of that kind of stuff.
I love how all your cars, what was it, an Avalon, Elantra, and Sonata?
Hmm.
Like I mean, they sound like fantasy titles,
Yeah, or I was
lands
gonna
for
say
like a
like almost
far off
like
state
symphony
or
orchestra writings. Like,
yeah,
yes.
right.
Well, sonata actually is some sort of
Oh,
term,
there
I
we
think, for
go. Yeah.
music. Yeah, but the other ones like Elantra. There's actually I'm reading. I think I'm reading a book right now called Elantris. Now that I think
Yeah,
about
is
it,
that a Brandon Sanderson
yeah,
thing?
it is.
Yeah, that sounds about
That's
right,
funny.
yeah.
Well, hey,
Yeah, and
look.
Avalon was the mythical land, but anyway, sorry.
Nice. No, no. I was just gonna say, it's Friday, and I thought it would be a little fun to end with a bit of a game. And once again, Reed is pulling up
Ooh.
his iPad, and he is, again, once again, not the artist, not the drawer, but we're gonna play a little game here, writer, where you get to describe what I'm drawing to the as if, because the people can't see it, right? And so you have to describe what I'm drawing, and then eventually you're gonna have to guess to see uh, what it is that you think I was going for.
Okay. Right now I'd say you're drawing existential ennui. Um, nothingness,
Nothingness.
nihilism.
Yes. Okay. So here we have our screen here. All right. Let's see here. We'll start with some of this. All right. Yeah, this is a great description you got
Okay.
here, Ryder.
Okay. Yeah, that's. Oh, sorry. This is. I'm zoned out. I'm just like, okay. So there's
Okay.
some sticks laying on the ground. It's like a lollipop head. So, oh, it's a stick figure man on the looks like appears to be laying down. Head is in the center of the screen. Uh-oh. Here comes. It looks like little sticks coming out of the sky. That have it's are they fingers? Is these arms? And then there's a bag of lumpy potatoes with and, and it looks like this huge hand that's about to slap the guy that's laying on the ground. And oh, wait, it's a wing. The whole thing is a bird. It's a bird with wings. Those two little sticks are feet. And there's a word bubble coming out of its mouth that it says "Ka!" How do you make quack, quack, quack?
uh, that's
Oh yes. So there is a large bird that looks like it's coming down to peck out the entrails of a man laying on a plank in the
yeah,
middle of the
yes.
picture. Yes,
Beautiful.
yes.
See, even though that is lovely and horrible drawing, it got the point across.
Caw!
Caw. All right, here's another one for you, Ryder. All right,
Okay.
let's see here.
Diagonal slash. A parallel diagonal slash with some little stripy dotted dashes going down the middle. That initially makes me think of a road, but it could be a pipe, and these could be little bitty poops running down it. I'm not sure. Um, there is now scribbly dots that are showing up on the side of the road. They're kind of roundish. Uh-oh. Now we've got something else going on top of the dots. It looks like fenders and a truck bed. And yes, oh my gosh, it is the top half of somebody's head with a huge nose, a proboscis on the front, and these two square eyeballs staring at us. It's like a face. It's actually a baseball cap turned sideways on somebody.
Uh, that's great.
Proboscis. So he's just switched colors over to blue to move upwards to give us an alternate drawing. Yes, once again, it is a straight line with two bumps and some diagonal slashy marks. Ooh, He is drawing something now. It looks complicated. It looks like another truck inside this oh, wait, what is going on? This is there is a now a new truck on this little flat line with the bumps on it, and it seems to be ramping over the top of one of these bumps. There is a truck jumping a bump, and there is debris flying out the back of this truck. It's multicolored debris. Uh, and this truck, it seems to be misshapen, like it is losing its back wheel for sure. So that's probably accurate to the times whenever I was pulling these kind of stunts.
How
Actually,
did I do in my
that's a fun
depiction?
drawing. I like that. I like the motion marks too. I was calling them hash marks, but yes, they're motion streaks.
Well, lucky for you, Ryder. I'm gonna even assign this picture for you.
Woo!
I get this printed
Oh,
out. We'll put it right over your bed and just a big 65-inch canvas, I think is what it needs.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk with my wife about that. She controls the art that goes into the bedroom, but I now have this massive shop, so we can put it in the shop, frame
You
it
know,
up.
that's the fun thing, though, right? The gifts that people give you where they expect you to hang them or display them somewhere in your house, and you're like, ugh, thanks, but probably no.
Yeah, I my family has done this to me as well. They give me these lovely pictures, and I'm just like, I'm not really a pictures guy. Maybe I should be. Eh. So
That's funny. Well, Ryder, I think you did a wonderful job describing my amazing art pieces. Um, so, for those of you who are audio only, you will have to go check out the YouTube video for today's episode 24, October 29th, to see how good a job you think Ryder did describing these things.
oh, thumbs up, everybody. I'm looking for lots of love on these.
Well, to remind everyone of your challenge for today, go watch a sunrise or a sunset and recognize that in about 9 days, those will be shifted back an hour. So if you're not an early riser and you want to try and catch a sunrise, now is the time to do it. It is not horribly early. And if you are someone who needs to catch a sunset after work, now is also probably the time to do it before it shifts earlier in the day and maybe comes into your work hours. So go do some sunsets, sunrises, and even better, take pictures and share them with us on social media. Helpful for life. Um, and yeah, we'd love to see that. And if you guys want to send in some pictures, we'll gladly share some of them on this show. So, with that, Ryder, good luck to you this weekend. I wish, kind of, but not really, that I could be there to help you as you got all that extra work you got to take care of this weekend.
Yeah.
But I will, I'll pour one out for you, buddy. I'll pour one out for you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
And
Oh,
we'll end with a very bright and shiny thing, which my dad has said many times, or not my dad. Some people have said, "You sleep when you die, boy." Just
yeah, that's what's gonna have to happen this weekend.
yeah,
Yeah, I have to jump studios from my current studio into my shop, so that means I have to finish out my office in the shop first. So no pressure. Meh.
no pressure at all. Well, with that,
Ah,
everyone have a lovely weekend and Halloween. Halloween's on Sunday. I guess we probably should have mentioned that
mm-hmm.
before right now. But yeah, if you guys have some fun costumes and things you do this week, send them in to us. Helpful for Life. You can post them on social or send them to us through our contact form on our website. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what that looks like. And make sure you guys eat lots of candy and apples and candy apples and have a good Halloween.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.